The chainsaw started at 6:47 in the morning. Raymond Kowalski heard it from inside his kitchen, standing at the counter in his robe, pouring his first cup of coffee. He set the pot down slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the side yard. And then he saw it. His tree, the great black walnut that had stood in that yard for 112 years, was coming down. Branch by branch, limb by limb, the sawdust catching the morning light like snow. Raymond Kowalski didn't scream, didn't run outside, didn't even raise his voice. He just stood at that window, both hands wrapped around his coffee mug, and watched. And in that silence, that terrible, patient silence, the wheels of something slow and unstoppable began to turn. Because here's what the man with the chainsaw didn't know. He didn't know about the survey, he didn't know about the appraisal, and he sure didn't know who Raymond Kowalski was or what Raymond Kowalski was capable of. He was about to find out. Let me tell you about Millbrook Crossing. It sits in the rolling hill country just east of Fredericksburg, Virginia, a quiet neighborhood of wide lots and old-growth trees, about 40 minutes south of Washington, D.C., the kind of place where people still wave from their driveways, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, where the 4th of July smells like charcoal and sparklers and someone always brings too much potato salad. In the summer of 2019, Millbrook Crossing was everything a subdivision brochure promises and almost never delivers. The lots were half-acre minimum. The sidewalks were clean. There were no HOA wars, no feuding about fence heights, no passive-aggressive notes on windshields. The oaks and maples and black walnuts that lined Shenandoah Court, the street at the heart of the neighborhood, had been there longer than any of the houses, longer than most of the families, longer in some cases than the town itself. The biggest of them all stood on the corner lot at 14 Shenandoah Court. 92 feet tall, a trunk 4 feet in diameter at the base, bark so dark and thick it looked like armor. In the summer, its canopy threw shade across half the street. In the fall, it rained down black walnuts by the bushel. In winter, after a snowfall, it looked like something out of a painting. The neighbors called it Old Walter. Nobody remembered why. It had just always been called that. And it belonged, every inch of it, root to crown, to Sergeant First Class Raymond Kowalski, United States Army, retired. Raymond Joseph Kowalski was 68 years old in the summer of 2019. 5'11", 210 pounds, most of it still muscle from a lifetime of early mornings and physical discipline. He had a thick white mustache and the kind of hands that looked like they'd been carved from oak themselves, wide, calloused, scarred in 3 places he never talked about. He had served in the United States Army from 1971 to 1998, 27 years. He'd been drafted at 19, shipped to Vietnam in the summer of 1972, and came back 18 months later quieter than when he left. He would eventually re-enlist, then re-enlist again. The Army became the only structure that made sense to him after what he'd seen in the Mekong Delta. He served with the 101st Airborne Division, later with the 82nd. He was in Grenada in 1983, Panama in 1989, Saudi Arabia during Desert Shield. He retired in 1998 as a Sergeant First Class with 27 years of service, a Combat Infantryman badge, a Bronze Star, 2 Army Commendation Medals, and a Purple Heart he kept in a shoebox under his bed because he felt funny about displaying it. Men who deserve Purple Hearts, he once told his daughter, are mostly the men who didn't come home. After retirement, Raymond came to Millbrook Crossing because his wife, Patricia, had grown up just 12 miles away in Culpeper County. She'd always wanted to come back. They bought the corner lot on Shenandoah Court in 1999, fell in love with the old walnut tree in the side yard, and built their life around it. Backyard barbecues, grandchildren playing in its shade, Patricia hanging a hummingbird feeder from the lowest branch every spring. Patricia passed away from ovarian cancer in the spring of 2014. She was 61 years old. Raymond still hung the hummingbird feeder every April, right on that same branch. He never missed a year. He was a man of routine and stillness. He woke at 5:15 every morning. He drank his coffee black. He kept a meticulous garden and a workshop in his garage where he built furniture from reclaimed wood, chairs, tables, small cabinets that he gave away to veterans organizations and church raffles. He walked his old beagle, Corporal, every evening at dusk. The neighbors loved Raymond Kowalski, not in a loud way, in the quiet way that matters, the kind where a man's presence makes a street feel safer without anyone being able to explain exactly why. There was one thing, though, that Raymond had never quite shaken: a stiffness of the jaw, a stillness that came over him sometimes when sounds caught him off guard, a car backfiring, a lawn mower starting up suddenly. He slept with the window cracked, even in January, because he needed to hear what was outside. Vietnam was a long time ago, but some places don't stay where you left them. He had learned over 50 years to let things pass through him rather than hold them, to breathe slow when the world moved fast. It was a discipline like everything else in his life. That discipline would serve him well in the months to come. Villain. The moving trucks arrived on a Saturday in early October 2019. 3 of them, white and orange. They pulled up to 16 Shenandoah Court, the property directly adjacent to Raymond's corner lot, and disgorged their contents over the course of 11 hours. Raymond noticed the pearl-white 2020 Porsche Cayenne parked at an angle in the driveway, straddling the apron like it owned both lanes of the street. He noticed the way the lead mover asked where a piece of furniture should go and was answered without the new owner looking up from his phone. And he noticed the name on the mailbox order confirmation tucked under the arm of the real estate agent: DEREKASHFORD Derek Pruitt was 39 years old. He had made a significant amount of money as a partner at a boutique commercial real estate development firm out of Tyson's Corner, the kind of firm that buys undervalued properties, bulldozes whatever's on them, and replaces them with mixed-use developments that win design awards and displace communities. His firm's website called him a visionary real estate strategist. His LinkedIn showed him at conferences in Dubai, Aspen, and Singapore. He was trim, tanned, and dressed in the weekend uniform of a man who wanted people to know he could afford not to dress up: a slate gray Patagonia vest, slim-fit chinos, and driving loafers that cost more than most people's car payments. He had been divorced once. He had a daughter he saw 3 weekends a year. He had 4 different social media accounts and posted on all of them constantly: aspirational real estate content, private jets, gym selfies with motivational captions. He called his followers his community. He was not, by nature, a man who noticed other people unless they were useful to him. The first red flag came on day 2. Raymond had walked over on Sunday morning, corporal at his heel, a small jar of Patricia's preserved peach jam in his hand, the way she'd always taught him to greet new neighbors, to introduce himself. Derek was standing in the driveway on a phone call. Raymond waited, smiled. Derek held up one finger without looking at him and kept talking for 4 more minutes. When he finally hung up, he looked Raymond over once, the worn Levi's, the old army sweatshirt, the beagle, and said, "Yeah, can I help you?" Raymond extended his hand. "Raymond Kowalski, I'm your neighbor, corner lot, wanted to welcome you to the street." Derek glanced at the jam jar, didn't take it, didn't take the handshake either. "Cool. Look, I'm slammed right now. The landscapers are coming Wednesday and I need to prep some things. We'll catch up sometime." He walked back inside. Raymond stood in the driveway for a moment, looked down at Corporal, set the jam jar on the front step, and walked home. He didn't say anything about it to anyone. He just filed it away, the way he'd filed away 1,000 small pieces of information over a lifetime of service. You never know, he'd learned, which detail will matter later. The landscaping company Derek hired showed up on Wednesday as promised. 12 men with commercial-grade equipment. They worked fast and they worked loud, and by the end of the day, 16 Shenandoah Court had been stripped of its modest, overgrown character and replaced with something that looked like a hotel courtyard: river rock mulch, ornamental grasses, low-slung boxwoods shaped into perfect spheres. Raymond watched from his garage, sanding a cabinet door, and said nothing. The trouble started 3 weeks later, in late October, when Derek walked his property line for the first time with a tape measure and a can of orange spray paint. Here is what you need to understand about that property line. Old Walter, the black walnut, sat in Raymond's side yard, but its root system, as black walnut trees are known to have, extended outward in every direction for a radius of 60 to 70 feet. Several of those roots ran under the ground toward 16 Shenandoah Court, and one very large surface root, thick as a man's thigh, gnarled and ancient, crossed the property line by approximately 8 inches. Just 8 inches. On a November morning, Raymond found a note tucked under his front door mat, typed "No greeting." It read, "The root system of your tree is encroaching on my property and has already cracked my new pavers. This is a nuisance and a liability. I expect you to have the tree professionally removed within 30 days or I will take further action." Raymond read it twice. He read it a third time. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in a manila folder he labeled with the date, and called the only person he trusted with matters like this, his old Army buddy, Walter Gaines, who had left the service in 1994 and spent the next 25 years building a reputation as one of the sharpest real estate attorneys in Northern Virginia. "Walt," Raymond said, "I need you to tell me what my rights are regarding a tree." "What kind of tree?" Walter said. "Black walnut, about 112 years old." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Walter said quietly, "Raymond, have you had that tree appraised?" Raymond had not. Until that phone call, it had never occurred to him that old Walter was anything other than a beautiful old tree, a piece of Patricia's memory, a piece of the neighborhood's history. "Get it appraised," Walter said. "Before you do anything else, get it appraised." Raymond knocked on Derek's door that same afternoon. He knocked twice. He waited. Derek answered in a blazer mid-afternoon, which struck Raymond as odd. Raymond said calmly, "I got your note. I want to talk about this." Derek crossed his arms. "There's nothing to talk about. Your tree is destroying my property." 8 inches of root is across the line, Raymond said. "Virginia law says you can trim what crosses your property. I'm happy to have an arborist come out and—" "I don't need an arborist," Derek said. "I need the tree gone. If you can't handle your responsibilities as a property owner, I'll find another way to handle it." He shut the door. "Now I want to pause here and ask you something, and I mean this sincerely. Have you ever tried to have a reasonable conversation with someone who has already decided the outcome? Someone who isn't interested in solutions, only in winning? If you've had a neighbor like that, drop it in the comments. Because I think a lot of us have been exactly where Raymond was standing on that porch, trying to be decent, getting a door shut in our face for it." Raymond went home and did 2 things. First, he called Certified Arborist and Tree Appraisal Services of Culpeper County, run by a woman named Dr. Anita Shelby, a former Virginia Tech forestry professor who was the most respected tree appraiser in the Piedmont region. He scheduled an appointment for the following week. Second, he drove to the hardware store and bought 3 things: a weatherproof security camera system, a box of manila folders, and a new black composition notebook. He installed cameras that weekend, one on the front porch, one on the side of the garage facing old Walter, one covering the rear of the property, all recording in 4K, all motion activated, all backing up continuously to a cloud server. He also pulled out the original 1999 property survey from his filing cabinet, the one he'd received at closing, and compared it carefully to the spray-painted orange line Derek had laid down near the property boundary. Something caught his eye, but he said nothing yet. He just made a note in his black composition notebook and filed the survey away. Dr. Shelby arrived on a gray Tuesday morning in early November. She was thorough. She walked the tree for 40 minutes with a clipboard, a measuring tape, and a core borer. She tested the wood density. She measured the crown spread. She photographed the bark, the root structure, and the trunk diameter at breast height. Then she went home and prepared her appraisal. The incidents, meanwhile, continued to stack up. In the 3rd week of November, Raymond found a city code enforcement notice on his door, citing him for overgrowth of trees creating sightline hazards. Someone had filed a complaint. Raymond photographed the notice, dated it, and put it in the manila folder. In December, Corporal came home one evening with a cut on his right forepaw. Raymond cleaned it and wrapped it. He didn't say anything, but the camera on the side of the garage had recorded Corporal running near the property line and then yelping. And when Raymond reviewed the footage, he saw what had happened. A strip of metal lawn edging had been hammered into the ground along Derek's side of the property line, buried just below the surface, sharp edge up. Raymond photographed the edging, photographed Corporal's bandaged paw, added it to the folder. In January 2020, he received a certified letter from a law firm, Pruitt & Associates LLC. Wait, same last name. Turns out Derek Pruitt had a cousin who was a real estate attorney. The letter alleged that Raymond's tree was causing continuing property damage and emotional distress, and demanded he remove the tree or face litigation seeking $50,000 in damages. Raymond read the letter, folded it, put it in the folder, called Walter Gaines. "They sent a letter," Raymond said. "I know," Walter said. "Get ready, because the appraisal came in this morning. I think you should sit down." Raymond sat. "But before we get to the appraisal, before we get to the part where everything changes, something happened on a cold morning in February 2020 that crossed a line Raymond Kowalski had not thought anyone in polite society would cross. He woke at 5:15 as always, made coffee, went to the window. The hummingbird feeder was gone. Not fallen, not blown down. Gone. Patricia's hummingbird feeder, the one she'd bought at a craft fair in Culpeper in 2003, the one Raymond had hung from old Walter's lowest branch every April for 6 years since she passed, was not there. The wire hook was bent, the branch had been cut. He walked outside in the February cold in his robe and his boots. He looked at the branch, looked at the ground, looked at the fresh sawdust on the dead grass at the base of the tree. Someone had climbed up and sawed off the branch while he slept. The camera footage confirmed it. 2:43 in the morning, a dark figure in a hoodie carrying a hand saw, the face not clearly visible, but the figure approached from the direction of 16 Shenandoah Court, and when the job was done, the figure walked back the same way. Raymond stood in the yard for a long time. The cold didn't seem to bother him. He looked up at the wound in old Walter's bark where the branch had been, looked at the empty space where the feeder had hung, thought about Patricia, thought about the last time she'd filled it with sugar water, her hands still steady even at the end. Then he went inside, made a second cup of coffee, called Walter. "They cut a branch off my tree and took Patricia's feeder," he said. There was silence on the line. Then Walter said very quietly, "Raymond, don't do anything, don't go over there. I need you to save that footage and email it to me right now, and then I need you to trust me." Raymond said, "I trust you, Walt." And then he did something that nobody watching would have expected. He didn't go over to Derek's house. He didn't call the police, not yet. He went out to his garage, sat down at his workbench, and he started building something. A chair, a simple, beautiful Windsor chair, the kind Patricia had always loved. He worked slowly the way he always did, methodical, precise, patient. Now, if you think Raymond Kowalski is going to let this go, then you've never met a man like Raymond Kowalski. And if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know what quiet patience from a man like this actually means. It means something is coming, something slow and certain and absolutely devastating. Stick around. The knowledge, the plan, 20-00-24-00. Here is what nobody knew at the time. Here is what Derek Pruitt, with his Patagonia vest and his Porsche Cayenne and his cousin's law firm, did not take 30 seconds to find out before he filed that code complaint, before he buried that metal edging, before he climbed into Raymond Kowalski's yard in the middle of the night and sawed off a branch. The black walnut tree, Old Walter, had been appraised by Dr. Anita Shelby using the trunk formula method, the gold standard for high-value tree appraisal recognized by the International Society of Arboriculture. She had taken into account species value, condition, location, and the replacement cost of a specimen tree of that size and age. Her appraisal came in at $183,000. $183,000 for a single tree. And here's why that number matters, and this is the part where you'll want to lean in. Under Virginia law, specifically the Virginia Code section governing wrongful destruction of property, the destruction of a tree on someone's property, particularly a high-value specimen tree, can result in damages of up to 3 times the appraised value, plus attorney's fees, plus any diminution in property value resulting from its removal. Walter Gaines had specialized in exactly this area of real estate law for over 2 decades. He had won 3 landmark cases in Virginia involving wrongful tree removal. He had argued before the Virginia Court of Appeals twice. He knew this law the way Raymond knew the barrel of an M16. But that wasn't even the second thing Derek Pruitt didn't know. The second thing was the survey. When Raymond compared the 1999 property survey to the orange paint Derek had sprayed along the property line, He noticed the discrepancy immediately, the way a man who has spent his career reading maps and terrain notices when something is slightly wrong. Derek's orange line was off, not by much, about 14 inches, but 14 inches in property law is not nothing. He hired a licensed surveyor in January, a retired county assessor named Gerald Firth, who spent 40 years drawing property lines in Stafford and Culpeper counties. Gerald came out with his equipment on a Thursday morning, spent 3 hours, and produced a certified plat survey. The result, Derek Pruitt's new commercial-grade pavers, the ones he claimed old Walter's roots were destroying, extended 11 inches onto Raymond Kowalski's property. Derek had paved over Raymond's land, and then complained about Raymond's tree damaging his illegally placed pavers. Now tell me, have you ever had someone wrong you and then act offended when you noticed? Because that is precisely the category of situation we are dealing with here. Drop a comment if you've seen something like this in your own life. I read every single one of them. There was one more thing. The night branch, the footage of the figure in the hoodie at 2:43 in the morning. Walter had submitted it to a forensic video analyst, a former colleague from his days doing expert witness work for the Virginia AG's office. The analyst was able to enhance the footage sufficiently to identify several distinguishing features: a specific gait, the logo on the hoodie, the shape of the hand saw being carried. It was enough for a criminal complaint. Walter Gaines sat across from Raymond at his kitchen table in late February 2020, drinking Raymond's black coffee, and laid it all out. The appraisal, the survey, the footage, the civil claims, the criminal options. Raymond listened to all of it without interrupting. He turned his coffee mug in his hands, looked out the window at old Walter, still standing, still bare-branched in the February cold. Then he said, "What do we need to do first?" And that, folks, is when everything changed. The morning of March 11th, 2020 was cold and bright, a hard sun on frozen ground, the kind of morning that makes everything look clear-edged and permanent. Raymond was on his porch at 7:15 with his coffee when the first vehicle came down Shenandoah Court, a Culpeper County Sheriff's Office cruiser, then a second, then a sedan with government plates that Raymond recognized from his years of service as the kind that doesn't advertise what it is. Behind them, a vehicle from Stafford and Culpeper Land Services, the survey company, with Gerald Firth in the passenger seat and 2 workers in the bed with stakes and orange flags. And behind that, Walter Gaines in his black Lincoln, carrying a briefcase and a look of quiet satisfaction. Raymond sipped his coffee. Derek Pruitt came to his door in a bathrobe, white, hotel weight, monogrammed. He had a travel mug in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked at the 2 sheriff's cruisers in front of his house and blinked the way people blink when the world suddenly refuses to cooperate with their self-image. "What is this?" he said. "What the hell is this?" The first deputy handed him a document. "Mr. Pruitt, this is a civil summons. You're being sued in Culpeper County Circuit Court by your neighbor, Raymond Kowalski, for damages related to the wrongful destruction of property, criminal trespass, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Derek's eyes went to Raymond's porch. Raymond raised his mug slightly. The second document was from the county. A citation for encroachment. Derek's pavers were formally documented as extending onto Raymond's property. He would need to remove them at his own expense within 60 days or face daily fines of $250. The third document was the one that made Derek's face go the color of old concrete. It was a criminal complaint filed with the Culpeper County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, alleging criminal trespass and malicious destruction of property. The branch, the feeder, based on the security camera footage and the forensic video analysis. "That's not that footage doesn't show," Derek started. Walter Gaines stepped forward from the Lincoln. He was 66 years old, gray-haired and immaculate, and he handed Derek a bound copy of the civil complaint with the kind of controlled calm that only comes from knowing you have already won. "Mr. Pruitt, my client is seeking $167,000 in damages for the destruction and diminishment of the black walnut tree on his property, plus attorney's fees, plus the cost of survey correction and property restoration. Additionally, we are seeking an injunction requiring the removal of your encroaching pavers within 30 days. He paused. You may want to call a lawyer who isn't your cousin." Behind Derek, the survey crew had already entered the side yard and begun driving stakes along the true property line. Bright orange flags in the frozen ground, each one marking the distance between what Derek had claimed and what the law actually said. Raymond finished his coffee, went inside, put on a second pot. He didn't gloat, he didn't watch, he had already seen everything he needed to see. The neighbors came out one by one, the Harrisons from number 9, the Acaffer family from number 12, Mrs. Pellegrino from across the street, still in her housecoat, arms crossed against the cold, the Garza kids on their bikes circling at a respectful distance. Nobody said much, they just watched. Derek stood on his porch for a long time after the deputies left, long after Walter Gaines drove away, long after the survey crew finished their work and packed their truck. He stood there with the stack of legal documents and his cooling travel mug, and the street was very, very quiet. The weeks that followed were, by all accounts, excruciating for Derek. His cousin's law firm withdrew from the case within 10 days, citing a conflict of interest. He hired a firm out of Fairfax County. They reviewed the evidence, the appraisal, the survey, the footage, and had a frank conversation with their new client about his options. The pavers were removed in April. $32,000 of commercial paving pulled up and hauled away, the raw earth graded and reseeded. Raymond watched it from his garage window while he sanded. The criminal complaint proceeded through the system. The Commonwealth's attorney, after reviewing the enhanced footage, elected to pursue charges of criminal trespass and malicious destruction of property. Derek's attorney negotiated hard. In the end, Derek avoided jail time but received a 12-month suspended sentence and 2 years of supervised probation. He was also required to pay restitution. And in September 2020, the civil case settled quietly and without Derek admitting liability, because his attorneys counseled him strongly against going to trial with the evidence Raymond's team had assembled. The settlement amount was $144,000, plus attorneys' fees and court costs. $144,000 because of a tree, because of a hummingbird feeder, because a man decided that his neighbor, an old man, a widower, a veteran, could be pushed around. He was wrong. The for sale sign went up at 16 Shenandoah Court in November 2020. Nobody on the block was surprised. Derek Pruitt relocated to a luxury apartment in Tyson's Corner, smaller than his house, considerably more expensive, with no trees anywhere near him. His real estate development firm had a difficult 2020 and 2021. 2 of his projects faced zoning challenges. A third, a mixed-use development in Prince William County, was put on hold pending an investigation by the state's Department of Environmental Quality. The investigation had nothing to do with Raymond Kowalski, but it added to the ruin. By 2022, Derek Pruitt had stepped down as a managing partner. His Instagram, once full of Dubai conference rooms and private jet tray tables, went quiet. Raymond used part of the settlement to establish the Patricia Kowalski Memorial Scholarship Fund at Germanna Community College, 1 full-year scholarship annually for a student from Culpeper County pursuing a degree in environmental science or horticulture. Patricia, he felt, would have loved that. He donated another portion to the Culpeper County Veterans Services Fund. The new neighbors at 16 Shenandoah Court, a young couple named Marcus and Alina Vance, both schoolteachers, moved in the following spring. They had a 4-year-old daughter named Lily who immediately became fascinated by Old Walter and spent entire afternoons running around its roots. Marcus brought over a 6-pack the first Saturday and asked Raymond about the tree. Raymond told him the whole story, sitting on the porch, watching Lily climb the lower roots in the afternoon light. Marcus shook his head slowly. $183,000 for a tree. Not just a tree, Raymond said. In April 2021, right on schedule as he had done every year since 2014, Raymond went out to Old Walter with the hummingbird feeder. Patricia's feeder had never been found, but he'd driven to the same craft fair in Culpeper the previous fall and found a woman selling nearly identical ones, hand-blown glass, the same deep red and violet. He climbed a stepladder and hung it on a new branch, a little higher than before but strong and in the right light. By May, the hummingbirds had found it. You see, folks, this story is not really about a tree. It's not about a lawsuit or a settlement or orange survey flags in frozen ground. It's about the mistake that certain kinds of people make again and again across every neighborhood and every era when they look at a quiet man and see weakness. Derek Prout looked at Raymond Kowalski and saw an old man in worn Levi's with a beagle and a jar of peach jam. He saw someone he could push, someone who would absorb the insult and move on, someone who didn't matter. He didn't see the 27 years of service. He didn't see the bronze star or the purple heart in the shoebox. He didn't see the discipline it takes to wake up every morning for half a century and choose patience over reaction. He didn't see the man who had faced far worse than a rude neighbor and a legal dispute and had come through all of it with his character intact. He didn't see the hummingbird feeder, and he didn't understand what it meant. Raymond Kowalski won because he was prepared, because he documented, because he was patient, because he had a lifetime of training in the difference between stillness and weakness. And because he understood something that men like Derek Prout never quite grasp, that the most powerful move available to a decent person is simply to let the law do what it was designed to do, and to make sure when the moment comes that you have given it everything it needs to work. Let me leave you with this. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. And never, I mean never, pick a fight with a veteran who has learned that the hardest battles aren't won by the loudest voice in the room. They're won by the man still standing after everyone else has gone home. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone, a father, a grandfather, a neighbor, a veteran you know, share it with them. And if you have a neighbor story of your own, you know where to find me, right here in the comments. I'll see you next time. Disclaimer. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.